Welcome back. This is our episode 5, Blood Calls Blood, Reaction and Analysis. Right at the beginning, before I say anything, I want to say that this episode deals with suicide and it deals with a pretty intense scene of sexual assault. So that content is in this video, and I want to say that up front in case anybody would be made uncomfortable by that content. And I think I'm going to actually post the suicide prevention hotline in the video because the suicide theme is pretty strong in this episode. And if you or somebody you know is having dark thoughts, then there are resources and you can get help. With that being said, let's talk about the episode. I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. I thought it was the best we've seen in the series so far. I kept thinking about the TV show The Band of Brothers, HBO, which was about Easy Company in World War II, which is a universally loved show. My personal feelings on that show was that it kind of suffered from the Star Trek movie phenomenon where like one episode was good and one episode was okay, and then one episode was really good and then one episode was okay. That's just my personal feeling about that series, which was an incredible series. And obviously there's the trope that every, I think, evenly numbered Star Trek movie is shit. I'll leave that. We can discuss all of that in other videos. This is about Wheel of Time. But I do kind of feel like we've gotten good episode, okay episode, good episode, okay episode, up and up. And this episode 5 is carrying on that sort of pattern. And maybe that's something that has to do with writing for television, for episodic television, is you get all your goodness in one episode, and then you have to kind of have a transition episode. And that before you can get back into your goodness. I don't know. I'm not a television writer. I'm just a guy who's read and loves The Wheel of Time. So the way I want to do this video is I've grabbed some screenshots from the episode as usual, and I'm going to just kind of go through. I'm not going to go scene by scene. I'm going to go through each sort of arc that I saw in the episode and just talk about what I really enjoyed, and what I think made this sort of the blueprint for how this show can be great. You know, this is the first episode of the second half of the first season. We're clearly setting the table for what I'm hoping is going to be an incredible climax to this first season, to the Eye of the World interpretation. So, you know, they blended the Camlin plot with the characters' arrivals in Tar-Valon. Very similar to how they've done adaptations of other epic fantasy novels where they combine characters and they combine settings to get, you know, to truncate such a large book into a small short window for a television show. And I think they were fairly successful. Now there's you know, the elephant in the room would be, well, what about the Andorian royal family? What about Elaine and Gawain's introduction to the show? And because I would consider Elaine especially, but also Gawain, as main characters. My takeaway from Eye of the World and The Wheel of Time as a whole is that Elaine, the daughter heir, sort of rounds out the main 5 characters, and she's sort of the 6th. You know, there's 3 men, there's 3 women, and Elaine is obviously Rand's counterpart, as you know, a princess and a queen, and obviously Gawain is a very important character to Gawain. I'm sure there's a way to introduce those characters. Long-running series, you know, usually benefit from introducing fresh characters as the seasons go on. So we didn't necessarily need to meet them right away. But I will say I do miss the scene where Rand falls into the garden or orchard at the royal palace in Camlin and encounters Gawain Elaine and Galad, and they all have sort of different ideas what to do with him. That, Elaine immediately really likes him. Gawain isn't so sure, and Galad, who I'm not even going to touch what his relationship is to Rand, wants to turn him in. So, and there's also, and they do touch on kind of that a little bit. And I'll talk about this when I talk about Rand's arc, but Logain's procession through the city, where he sees Rand. Gawain has a line, I think he says it to Min when he's training at the White Tower to become a warder, that he's like, man, everybody I meet's met Rand al'Thor, and just sort of the illusion that this is before everyone knows that Rand's the Dragon Reborn. But Logain clearly recognizes, and we know, it's implied that he's looking at Mat, but we know he's looking at Rand. But I'll talk about that when we get to that. So that's the only thing I miss from not going to Camblin. They jumped ahead a month at the beginning of this episode after the funeral of the Aes Sedai who died in the fight with Logain's followers. And I think that was good because I do like a little bit of breathing room. Maybe they did go to Camlin in that month. We can go backwards and, say, oh, this, it implies that Mat and Rand were on the road, particularly Mat and Rand, and also Perrin and Egwene were the Tinkers for a while, but they're on the road. And while I do enjoy Mat and Rand's arc while between Shadar Logoth and their arrival at Camlin, not a lot happens. They encounter Dark Friend after Dark Friend after Dark Friend, and Mat gets progressively worse, but we're being shown that in this episode rather than told that, which is good cinematic storytelling. So that's kind of how I'm going to do this video. Start with my favorite stuff from the episode, which are these sweeping shots of Tar Valon, dragon mounts in the background, the White Tower. It's a good interpretation of what Tar Valon looks like. It's a city on an island. It's a walled city. There's towers all around. There are a couple of very elegant bridges to the mainland, and there's settlements on each side of the bridges. And then right in the middle is the White Tower, just very prominent, very distinct, unlike any architecture we've seen maybe besides Shadar Logoth. I'd have to look up the history of the White Tower. I believe it was built after the breaking. Ogier, back when Ogier were still building cities. Yeah, Tar Valon is Ogier built, and we find out more about the Ogier in this episode because we meet Loyal, who's one of my favorite characters. I think everybody loves Loyal. So just some great shots of Tar Valon. We got a nice shot of, I believe that's southward, with the sun going down. And then we got a night shot to sort of time the episode. This episode, at least what takes place in Tar Valon, seems to occur during a single day. In reality, it's probably a few days. But we have a daytime. They enter the city at the daytime, the sun sets, and then we have it at nighttime, which I think is great because we see what this city. It makes it a real place because we see it at different times of the day. Dragon Mountain in the background. The sort of. I wish we had gotten. In case you don't know, Tar Valon, and I'll post the map here, looks like a vagina. And I apologize if you didn't know that and didn't want to see it, because now you can never unsee it. But with the shots of Tar Valon and Dragon Mountain in the background, the idea that the female half of the one power is female and the male half is male. So you have a mountain and a valley. I don't need to paint the picture for you. I'm sure you're smart enough to figure it out. We didn't get, a explicit vagina shot of Tar Valon, and that would have been interesting, to say the least. But it's clearly shaped the same. And so I'm just really happy that we got such great exterior shots of the White Tower and also incredible interior shots. I really spent a lot of time when I was grabbing screens for this video, just looking at the different spaces of this place, this sort of capital city slash temple. I guess the comparison in our world would be Rome, or Lhasa, where the Dalai Lama used to live. You know, this holy city. Not really. I don't know if holy is the right word. Religion is a little different in the Wheel of Time, but certainly this mystical city, this city of power, and the very real places inside of it that people live. The quarters they put Nynaeve in the warders' quarters. This shot of Lan entering Moraine's chambers, what with the sun, just I mean, this is so beautiful. And I've said a couple of times what I was really looking forward to and what I'm getting are these quieter, slower moments where this scene takes about 10 seconds of Lan coming into the room, opening the door, coming into the room, closing the door, and then he has another one of these quiet moments with Egwene where they sort of explore the water bond and talk about Lance is clearly upset because he's seen his friend Stefan lose his Aes Sedai, and Lan is clearly scared of losing Moraine in the same fashion. But really just the fact that they took a pregnant moment, a pregnant pause to show this really, I feel is what the fans deserve. The fans deserve to see this world, not just story beat to story beat, but to see the setting, to see the mood, to see what it feels like to be sitting in an Aes Sedai study in the White Tower while these great events are happening around the world. And then I just wanted to finish off by talking a little bit about Liandrin. This was my favorite scene in the episode. I really am enjoying the villains in this series so far. Liandrin is great in this episode, and Eamon Valda is great in this episode. Looking for the actress who plays her. Kate Fleetwood. She comes in, and it seems like that there's this, who's going to recruit Nynaeve? Is it going to be the Reds or the Blue? Or the Yellow? And they even mention that the Yellow, she's such a great healer that the Yellow might get her. I think it's less about where Nynaeve is going to be, which Aja she's going to join, and more about just letting Liandrin be bad. Because she comes in and she gives this very threatening, sort of pleasant little monologue. And I wrote down the second half of this because I really thought it was a good bit of writing. I'll put it on the screen here. Women hold the one power, but men still control much of this world. And they are rarely kind to little girls that show a spark of being greater than they are. Now that you have escaped Moraine's cage, you should enjoy your freedom. That way leads to the library and onto the gardens. The persimmons are in season. And I should have even read it because I'm not doing justice. Kate Fleetwood just is dripping with menace and subtext in this little scene with, she's very threatening, I'm in charge here. I know everything about this place. You are, a country bumpkin with hay in her hair, and you're in the real city. And if you want to survive, you better pay close attention to me. Just lots of, veiled threats, But I also think that she's honestly trying to recruit Nynaeve and figure out if she's right for the Red, or for other Ajas. Great performance. One of my favorite scenes in the episode. She also has another scene with Moraine in the episode where they're talking about Aes Sedai politics, and she does this. She brushes Moraine's hair back from her ear. Now that is not something you do to a person that you have not been intimate with. Now there's, and so what I think they're suggesting is that Moraine and Leandrin were what are referred to as pillow friends when they were novices at the White Tower. In the books, Moraine and Siwan are pillow friends, and training at the White Tower is hard for women that can channel, and many of them develop intimate relationships with other novices as a way of coping. I don't know if I already said it, but in the books, Siwan and Moraine are pillow friends, lovers, when they're novices together. And I think this is meant to imply that maybe Liandrin and Moraine had a similar relationship. And then after they are raised to Aes Sedai, many times they go their separate ways and no longer maintain the friendships that they had when they were novices. And this is explained too, that because they've got way too much responsibility now. It's sort of like how you lose touch with your college friends. After college, everyone gets jobs, and a lot of people get married and start families. And these are people that you were very close with for years. You spent every waking moment with, and then life moves on. And so it has for Aes Sedai, and perhaps Moraine and Leandrin were friends or more than friends as novices, and now they are, I'll say it, they're adversaries, and certainly vying for recruiting Nynaeve to their respective Ajas, but also, larger politics, Aes Sedai politics, and global politics in the world of the Wheel of Time. Great moment between these two. And then the last thing I did see was that the last time we see Moraine after that meeting before the funeral is she's in her study, and she goes up to the fireplace and opens this picture on the wall. And I zoomed in on the picture, on the screenshot, and the screenshot is another woman in a blue dress looking through a window. My gut is that this is she's somehow communicating with her allies, her main ally, who I'm not going to spoil at this point, in the White Tower, and using this box as a method of communication. I'll talk a little bit about A New Spring, because there's more from A New Spring in this episode. It's been a while since I've read A New Spring, so I'm not quite sure if this is in the books. I don't remember it, but it could very well be in the books, and I just don't remember it. But I thought it was interesting that they lingered on this, and we'll find out a little bit more about this. I think I know what direction they're taking this in, but I don't really want to go into it now, just yet, until we get there. All right, so this episode starts with a funeral and it ends with a funeral. Again, Wheel of Time imagery. I don't know if this is how they just bury Aes Sedai, or if this is how all cemeteries are made in the Wheel of Time, but just the idea that time is a wheel, and we live many lives. Then we follow the arc of Stefan. Bear with me. Yes, Stefan Gaiden, who is warder to Kareen Nagashi, Kareen Sedai, who died in the last episode. And I knew that I'm glad that they grabbed a character from these characters are in A New Spring, from the many, many background Aes Sedai who, maybe show up for a chapter or two, are mentioned a couple of times, but aren't, part of the main plot or some of the subplots. So good to see these two in the books. Kareen and Stefan are hunting the Dragon Reborn, not hunting, but looking for the Dragon Reborn on orders from the former Amerlin seat, Tamra Ospenia. Karen was actually, or Kareen, excuse me, Kareen was actually in line to be the next Amerlin seat. However, they mysteriously drown during a storm, and it's revealed that they were killed by the Black Ajah. And it's not revealed whether Stefan died, but does seem to be indicated that he died with her. So I'm glad that and she was Green Ajah, and so I'm glad that they rather than just bring in, oh, this is, so and so Sedai, they took a real character from the books and brought her into the show in a role that character would likely be as a leading figure of the Green Ajah. A nice touch. And Stefan is having, very difficult time because he was bonded to this woman and she was killed in battle and he outlived her, and warders are not supposed to outlive their Aes Sedai. And I think the message of this plot is to convey to the audience just how serious letting the one power into your life is, because this is the second time we've had a male character where they've been influenced by the one power and have committed suicide. We heard about Tom's nephew Owen, who found out he could channel or learn to channel as a male, went insane and cut his own throat. And then with Stefan, he is dealing with the very real physical loss of his Aes Sedai. And we learn that the way the White Tower usually handles a warder losing his Aes Sedai is to bond that warder to another Aes Sedai, and there are green Ajah Aes Sedai who specialize in taking on multiple warders and nursing them back to emotional health, I guess would be a way to put that. And that seems to be the direction they're going with Stefan. Alana is going to bond him, and she's going to help him recover from his grief. But before they can do that, he takes his own life. The funeral, we get a quick shot of, it's not really her funeral, but a ceremony where he's returning her ring to this forge or brazier of molten gold. I'm going to assume that this is where they get the gold for the new Great Serpent rings that the Aes Sedai wear, reminiscent of the one ring going into the Mountain of Fire in Lord of the Rings. I thought that was just a nice touch. Then Lan and Stefan have have some drinks, and I liked they're talking about. I liked how they, are just sort of openly talking about how joining Alana's team of warders is going to mean joining the sexual relationship that it's very clear the three of them have. And Stefan's like, I've never been with a man before. And Lan, they have, it's very open-minded. It's 2020 or 2021. We're open-minded about same-sex relationships or non-traditional relationships. So obviously the show is going to be no different. But I did think it was. Oh, I liked the way they handled it. I'm very open minded about that sort of thing. So, but I also don't need to be beaten over the head with same sex relationships, which we do see in some media. I think there's a right way to handle it and a wrong way to handle it, and I think in this case they're handling it great. They're handling it very natural. They're not calling too much attention to it, but it's a real thing because it is a real thing. And I enjoy it again. And again, the setting, these just two soldiers sharing a drink. Although I did think that they kind of messed up the continuity a little bit because if Land got so drunk that he passed out on the floor in this scene, which means Moraine would be blind drunk in her own quarters. I don't think it's a real issue. I think they really wanted to show these two guys sharing, staying up all night drinking together. And I'm not a guy who loses his mind over continuity problems. But yeah, this in the warders' quarters, drinking by torchlight, all the weapons that we see on the walls, just a nice tender moment between these two close friends, and very sad. Stefan kills himself, and the episode ends with his funeral. I thought this scene was a little over the top. I feel like, again, they're trying to show us a lot rather than assume we've read the novels. So that I think they're trying to show just how powerful of a loss it is to lose somebody that you've bonded with the One Power, and how deep the bonds between the warders and the Aes Sedai are. The beating of the chest and the screaming to the heavens, sort of the Klingon funeral. Again, we're setting the table for the climax of this season. And so not the end of every episode, they have to make sure that they don't, give us the signature series ending. But every episode has to end on sort of a strong story beat. So that's why I think they chose this funeral to be how this episode ended, and we can move on with the plot without having to deal with these characters again until some of the warders are reintroduced. I'm assuming later in this season or in next season when we meet Alana again, for example. Anyway, I know this video is running long, but this is such a good episode that I really wanted to spend more time talking about it, and just once again point out that the best performances we are seeing are the performances, the scenes between Land and Moraine. These actors clearly have chemistry, and they're clearly, they're reminding me a little bit of how R2-D2 and C-3PO act as sort of the chorus, particularly in the first Star Wars film. Because they are with the main cast, but they're somewhat separate from the main cast. And the way we are introduced to Star Wars is from the point of view of the droids. And so the way we've been introduced to the Wheel of Time so far has been from the viewpoint of these two characters. And they'll be with us. They'll be together for several seasons to come. And I really think it's to the benefit of the show and to the benefit of the audience. That they do have chemistry and that they do feed off of each other, and their scenes have been some of the most enjoyable in the show. All right, so talk about Matt and Rand arriving in Tar Valon. Matt is clearly suffering the effects of the dagger, the ruby-hilted dagger. Rand and Matt at this point suspect that he might be wasting away because he can channel. Interesting thing in the early books of the Wheel of Time, it's talked about how the men who can channel after the Dark One taints the One Power, the male half of the One Power, not only go mad, but they also rot. And I've always had this vision of when the male Aes Sedai are breaking the world, that they are kind of wizard zombies at that point, where they're wielding these incredible magics that are just destroying the planet, but the whole time their flesh is just rotting off their bones, and they look horrifying. And then as the series progresses, we hear less about the rot of the male half of the One Power, and it's all about the madness. And I don't want to go too much into how the male half of the One Power is channeled in the later books, but if I recall correctly, they mentioned the actual physical effects less, and it's more about the madness itself. But here to see Matt, physically weakening. I mean, he looks scary at this point. I mean, if you saw this guy on the street, you'd cross the street. Really going to miss this actor. Sorry to see that he's leaving the show. I don't know what was behind that decision, because he's giving us a great, nuanced performance of this character, who is both a good guy and kind of a bad guy at this point, because of the influence of the Ruby Dagger. And later in the episode, he has to have Matt has to have Rand reassure him again, and it sounds like he's been doing it a lot, that he wasn't the one that killed the Grinwalds, that it was the Fade. They also kind of make a pact that if it turns out that one of them is Matt, at least, if it turns out that I can channel, I want you to kill me. And I just interesting, the same way that Lan and Moraine are having some great scenes. There's some definite chemistry between the actor playing Rand and the actor playing Matt, and they lead us into Tar-Valon. I did want to note that, Tar-Valon, and I did want to note that we pass some portal stones a couple of times, which come into play in the next book. So we'll be establishing them now. We meet Loyal, and I want to get, just by way of comparison, I want to throw the Daryl K. Sweet artwork from the Wheel of Time role-playing game, which I don't have this book, and I'm hopefully I can pick it up. I don't think I've ever seen it or read it. I'd love to read it, because it does, with the Daryl K. Sweet artwork, it does appear to be a licensed property. I'd love to dig into this and see if it's any good. But I love Daryl K. Sweet's. I know artwork. I know it's somewhat dated. Especially now where there is so much incredible concept art in the world of science fiction and fantasy and superhero comic book films, and stories and books. Back in and also with the dawn of computer art, we just get a different level of art than we did, back in the 80s and 90s when these books were published, and there were only a handful of. There was a certain style, and Daryl K. Sweet is sort of the granddaddy of that style. Larry Elmore, who did a lot of the cover art for the Dungeons and Dragons books, like the Dragonlance books, is another one of my. This is how the world of epic fantasy was visually interpreted when I was growing up in the 90s, before we got Magic the Gathering and this sort of fantasy art revolution that we saw in the last 20 years. Michael Whelan. Chris Caldwell, obviously Ralph Bosky, the Hobbit and Return of the King animated films. So I love this art, and I love that we finally meet Loyal, because he's such a distinctive looking character. And we'll look up the actor playing Loyal. This video is going to be longer than the show at this point. Hamad Animation. I hope I pronounced that right. So the Ogier are from another planet or another reality, and the setting the places the Ogier live are sort of terraformed biospheres. That's why the Ogier cannot exist for too long outside of the steading, because it'd be like a human trying to live on Mars. And yes, maybe you've got, the ability to bring your own oxygen with you, and but eventually the fact that the gravity is different, the atmosphere is different, the day night cycle is different, the radiation is higher on Mars than it is on Earth. That's going to catch up with you, and you're going to need to come back to Earth. And it's a simplistic way of putting it, a simplistic allegory. You're going to need to come back to Earth where you're in your natural environment rather than be on an alien world. And the Ogier are alien beings. And I thought they did a really good job of, giving us Loyal's sort of his humor, his gentleness, his somewhat smug but harmless Ogier smugness. Oh, you humans are so hasty. Very much, very similar, akin to Treebeard encountering the hobbits in Lord of the Rings. But, Rand's scared from him first because he thinks he's a Trolloc. Rand's got the heron-marked sword. Also because, Loyal's a little smaller here, which I think is for practical shooting purposes. They just probably got a big guy and threw some makeup on him to make him look bigger, but without, having a Wookiee, or bigger walking around in every scene. And of course, in the library, in this tavern that's actually in Camlin, but since we're in Tarvalon, it's in Tarvalon. Really looked, the idea, and Rand's reading the Carathian cycle when he meets Loyal, and they mention the travels of Jane Farstrider, and that's another thing I love about Robert Jordan's world building is that he takes time to mention the books. That this is a world that has its own books and stories and songs and history. And Loyal is, I think he's actually looking for old songs. I think that's one of the, he wanted to lead the study. I won't go into Loyal's whole arc, but I think he was running away from a marriage, but his excuse was, I want to find old songs and stories and see the groves and the old Ogier built cities. So, we have there's a great shot there of Rand, with his sort of crown of red hair. And they've said a couple of times that the series seems to be teasing that it's actually going to be Egwene who's going to be the Dragon Reborn. And what a twist that'll be, and how mad the fans will be. They'll never do that. It's Rand. It's always been Rand. It's always going to be Rand. That's just sort of building up hype for the show, and in case they pull the old switcheroo on us. But this is, of course, when Logain sees Rand and realizes that, oh my God, that's the Dragon Reborn, because Logain can see Tavern. It's one of his talents, I believe. And here is Padden Fane. And when I saw him, I was like, he's going to be back in this episode. And then he wasn't. And I was like, and he's staring straight at Rand. And then that, that actor's very clear smile. And then he wasn't in the episode. And so what I need to do now is I need to go back to the last couple of episodes and see if he pops up in any other places. When Matt found the ruby hilted dagger in Shatter Lagoth, there was a shadow that sort of led him to that. In the books, it's the character of, I believe, Mordreth, who is eventually combines with Padden Fane. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any, just for a quick second, reflection of Padden Fane in Shadar Lagoth, or when they're at the mining town and they encounter the other Dark Friend. I'm wondering if Padden Fane is there, because Padden Fane is following the boys right now. He is the Dark One's hound, and he's been altered so that he can smell where Rand is, and he stuck close to them, I'm assuming, the entire time since they left the two rivers. And I'm just looking forward to seeing more of this character. And I was glad to see him as sort of a little Easter egg in the episode, and then they didn't use him again. I thought that was a nice little touch. And then we'll round out with Perrin and Egwene's arc with Eamon Valda. Really like the production design of the Tinkers, the colorful wagons, Aram's striped cloak. We say goodbye to Aram in this episode. I think we'll meet him again down the road. Great chemistry between these characters. I think Aram had a really standout performance, and he helps them escape tries to help them escape the White Cloaks, but is unsuccessful. The White Cloaks take them hostage, or capture them, I should say. There's this very rapey scene where they strip and clean Egwene. Very uncomfortable to watch this scene. And then they set them up for this little inquisition with Eamon Valda, where he tortures Perrin in front of her, where Eamon Valda tortures Perrin in front of Egwene to try to get Egwene to channel and reveal that she's the Aes Sedai. We have clearly departed from the idea that Aes Sedai are visually distinctive because of their ageless face. However, Eamon Valda does mention that an Aes Sedai told him once that an Aes Sedai doesn't need her hands or her tongue to channel, but he's still going to cut off their hands anyway. I think what we're getting, another just delicious villain, just saying, well, I don't even need to cut off your hands. I just like doing it. And then, tough scene to watch. I'm not a fan of torture or excessively bloody scenes in cinema. It's just my personal taste. We see the golden eyes for the first time. And then when he finally gets loose, again, just what a chicken shit villain Eamon Valda turns out to be. He shits his pants. Oh my God! After being so tough and in charge the entire arc, and I think Egwene stabs him and he falls unconscious, and they make their escape. We have another encounter with the wolves. Perrin's like, he doesn't want to hurt us. Great shot of the wolves. I'm glad they're using real wolves for this. Kudos to the animal trainer and handlers on set who have a very difficult task of shooting these wild animals as characters in the plot. I'm going to assume this is Hopper, and that Perrin's going to start talking to Hopper in his dreams very shortly. All right, so the last thing I want to do, and again, I apologize, we are at the 45-minute mark of this, or 43.5-minute mark of this video. So if you've stuck around this long, thank you so much. It's only because I really enjoyed this episode that I wanted to talk so much about it. The last thing I saw was Stefan was praying, making offerings to ward off the Forsaken, to these little statues. And one of the interesting things about the Wheel of Time is that they do have a prayer not to the Forsaken, but they are praying to ward off the Forsaken. It's one of the only we get a lot of prayers. Oh, and also when they have the funeral, I think at the beginning of the episode, or maybe the end of the episode, they mentioned may the last embrace of the mother carry you home. I should look that up. May the last embrace of mother. May you shelter in the palm of the Creator's hand, and may you shelter in the palm of the Creator's hand, and may the last embrace of the mother welcome you home, which is Shanarian burial. And then I thought it would be fun to just look at these Forsaken statues and effigies and try to guess who's who. So it says right away the one that, and I have a up close look, the one who looks a little bit like a big scary cat is Ishmael. Then we have next to his left, we have a what looked like a male and a female. Um, I kept looking for like a moon to guess if one of them is maybe Lanfear. Um, this one appears to be wearing a mask, but it's not the laughing mask that I think Belathamal wears. Very could he's got the high collared coat, which I think is to suggest a military man. So possibly Demandred is the one to the far to Ishmael's left, and then could be any female in here. I see one over here that I think the one in the on the left hand side, which is going to either be Masana, because Masana is always wreathed in shadows, and this one seems to be veiled, or Moog Haydn, who is the spider and the weaver. She's always in the background. And then this central one, only because Lanfear is the most important female Forsaken, I'm going to say this is Lanfear, but it could easily be. And if it was, I think, oh man, I got to look up my Forsaken. Um, Not Grandil, but there's the other Forsaken who's very sexual in her appearance, the one who likes to torture people to death. Drawn a blank, and I said I wasn't going to look up stuff. Um, yeah, we meet her in one of the last books. They capture her. Rand and his friends are able to capture her. Semerhage. There we go. Yeah. So that could be Semerhage. And then we get kind of a short and stout Forsaken. I don't, know who that's. Kind of I thought maybe this might be Agenor. When we're going to meet Agenor and Belathamal at the end of this season. So I'm wondering if this guy is kind of the ill-made, sort of, stunted, ugly. When we meet Agenor, he's an old man or not an old man, he's rotten because him and Belathamal were only half bound. And so while they've been kept alive, they've also been exposed to the ravages of time. Agenor is also the bioengineer of the Trollocs and the Shadow Spawn. So I love the Forsaken. I love villains. Oh, and we did get a couple more. Oh yeah, so there's prominent breast tells me that this is a very beautiful woman. So that's possibly Semerhage, and then this one almost has like a Egyptian look to it. I'm not even gonna guess. Maybe that's Asmodean. Could be any of the other male Forsaken, but I'm pretty sure that this was Demandred and possibly Grendel in the background, and then Masana, Lanfear, and Agenor. And I'll leave it at there. Thanks for sticking with us, coming in under 50 minutes. I think I covered everything I wanted to talk about. Please like and subscribe the channel. When we have next week's episode on Friday, we'll make next week's reaction video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.